First of all, it's a real privilege to be here today and to speak on this platform and to listen to Lee and Nathan. And it reminds me, everything that we say here today, you know, as parliamentarians, we're often protected by privilege, parliamentary privilege. And in this country, you know, I can speak here today. I won't worry about someone knocking on my door, not yet, unlike you guys. And I'm just in awe of being on a platform with you and the risks that you face just by speaking up for those of you who are in Hong Kong. So thank you for allowing me to say a few words today. I mean, I just wanted to start by reiterating what John MacDonald touched upon, which is that by critiquing and challenging China's behavior towards Hong Kong and fellow trade unionists, we do so as internationalist, democratic socialists who aren't afraid to shine the very same spotlight on Western democracy and its growing failings, something I can touch on very quickly in a bit. What we can see from the protests and resistance in Hong Kong is that demanding democracy is a common cause that is shared by so many of us in the labour movement. Having basic freedoms and liberties not just respected but upheld is something I think that is shared by people across the labour movement, across civil society, by the old, the young, by campaigners and by lawmakers. And that is why we stand in solidarity with Hong Kong protesters, trade unionists, and those who have been arrested and imprisoned. Democracy has always ebbed and flowed. People have always had to stand up and come together to defend democratic gains and fight for democratic expansion. But what we see happening in Hong Kong is in many ways just one front in an international battle between people and states that have been captured by capital. And yet China's model of authoritarian capitalism has allowed for some of the most aggressive new forms of state surveillance, oppression, and labor exploitation. Now, we can see this in the national security law, which has been mentioned, which gave the Hong Kong police power to control and remove online information if data breaches to national security are suspected. But we also know the model of state surveillance used by the Chinese government to suppress, to intimidate, to identify protesters is seen as a business opportunity by tech companies in Silicon Valley and around the world. For these companies, democracy is an obstacle to making profit. Human rights get in the way of doing business. Now, you may have seen Naomi Klein has written about something called the Screen New Deal, where big tech companies like Facebook, Apple, and Amazon see democracy as, quote, an inconvenient public engagement in the designing of critical institutions and public spaces. So protests in Hong Kong are resisting aggressive attacks on their rights and freedoms, but this isn't unique to China and to them. Many states are becoming the engines of capital, and democracy is seen as a barrier. And around the world, we can see authoritarians emboldened. We can see democratic gains and freedoms and liberty being assaulted, whether in Hong Kong, Belarus, Poland, and even here in the UK. I mean, here in the UK, we're faced with restrictions on our right to vote through the introduction of voter ID requirements. We're also facing the erosion of rights like the right to legally challenge the government decisions, through still to be decided challenges to the Human Rights Act and judicial review. So the crisis of democracy is global. It's a crisis that is driving us headlong to ecological collapse, diminishing our ability to force the wealthy, the corporations, and global finance to change course. I think that's why the labour movement must stand in solidarity with Hong Kong protesters and those who have been arrested and imprisoned, and members of parliament must do what we can, because democracy is our common cause. And that's why I'm so proud and so privileged to stand here today with you and say these few words. So thank you very much.